guests on the line? Feel free to unmute yourselves and tell us.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you. And sorry about that technical difficulty. Our computer shut down, which is no fun. So really quickly, I will go through who the Science Coalition is. So we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization based in Washington, D.C., comprised of more than 50 of the nation's leading public and private research universities. You can see our members below on this slide. We serve as a public affairs organization, and we're dedicated to promoting the need for sustained federal investment in basic or fundamental scientific research. Through TSC's communications efforts, we work to show policymakers and the public about how fundamental research done on our university's campuses stimulates the economy, spurs innovation, and drives America's global competitiveness. And so to do that, we conduct national and local media relations, including everything from earned and placed media to content generation, organic and promoted social media, and DC-based events with participants ranging from third-party partners to members of Congress. And so the reason why we wanted to kick off this local communications workshop series was to hear from the folks who actually do this work day in and day out on campuses across the country. And so we wanted to share best practices amongst TSC member institutions about how to effectively communicate the value of fundamental research to press, as well as facilitate an ongoing dialogue with TSC members and others in the higher education community to increase engagement opportunities with press, policymakers, and others. And so with that, I will kick it over to our experts today who we're really excited to have on the program. The first is Joanne Fahey. She is the Director of Research Communications at the University of Notre Dame. And then the second is Kristin Roberts, who is the Public Affairs Director at the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory at Florida State University. And so with that, I'll kick it off over to Joanne. Joanne, let us know if you have technical difficulties on your end.
All right, I'll do my best. Thank you. Oops. I think you need to unshare your screen and then I can share mine.
All right, should be ready for you.
Can everyone see my PowerPoint? And can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you and see it.
Great. Okay. So thank you so much. I'm Joanne Fahey, as everyone said, and I'm the Director of Research Communications here at Notre Dame. So I'm going to just be talking for about 10 minutes about some of the different events that we do here on campus to kind of showcase our federal funding to a variety of stakeholders. So just quickly, before we get into it, I hope most of you know about the University of Notre Dame, but we're based in South Bend, Indiana. We just had our 175-year anniversary. We have 7 colleges and schools that our faculty and students are based in, and the newest is our Keough School of Global Affairs. Some of our key areas of research, and I'll be talking about some of these a bit more today, are cancer, economics, environmental change, physics, and even Irish studies, as it's not surprising here at Notre Dame. A little bit about research at the university. So the key thing to note on this slide is our growth. We're not the biggest by any means, but we are serious about research and very committed to investing and growing our research portfolio. So just in FY18, we had another record-breaking year for research awards, and a lot of our funding, as you can see in this bottom left, are current awards by sponsor, and there's more detail on our website, research.nd.edu, but a lot of it comes from federal funding. So this is a very important piece of what we do, NSF, NIH, and EH as well. So you can see the breakdown there and the full details on our website. One question I always wonder about when I listen in on these things is who is actually doing all this work? So this is just a little bit about me and my team. I have a team of 5. We specifically support 24 different research units across campus. But as you'll see kind of throughout the presentation, we work really closely with our media relations team, our central marketing communications, and various communicators in our colleges and schools. And this is just us having some fun before a football game here on campus. And I know we're playing Florida State in about a few months, so it'll be another fun game for us here. Okay, So the first event I want to share is actually a series of events that we hosted as part of the launch of our brand new Notre Dame Turbomachinery Laboratory. And we announced this lab in 2014, and what made this special, other than just being a brand new great facility for us on campus, was that it was a public-private partnership that we actually built off campus in downtown South Bend, and that was the big change. So we decided to kind of do a bit more than we typically would, and what you're seeing on this first slide is this was our press conference announcing this new lab. And so our partners included the state of Indiana, the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, the city of South Bend, GE, Great Lakes Capital, and Indiana Michigan Power. So this was something where we really came together to invest in our community, to invest in this area of research, which we'd previously been doing on campus, and to build it in an area of South Bend that's kind of going through a lot of urban renewal. So our first event was the press conference. You can see here we had a great quote from our then Governor Mike Pence, so hopefully he has some federal awareness of the lab now. But what was really valuable about this event was that it actually kicked off a series of events that lasted for the next at least a year, but maybe more. So we really turned this news into something that we could celebrate a number of times over the course of the year, really showing off the investment in the community, the investment in research. So the next event we hosted was a groundbreaking ceremony with local and private leadership. We kind of took the Turbo Lab on the road to Indianapolis, which is where we hosted a luncheon with a number of leaders in the community in Indy as part of a football game that we were having down there. And then the photo that you're seeing at the top is my boss, the Vice President for Research here at Notre Dame, Bob Bernhardt, at our formal ribbon cutting ceremony. And these are a number of our researchers, including the director of the lab, but some of you might also recognize the younger gentleman on the left is Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who he's often touted as a potential Democratic nominee. So we're hoping that some local awareness and local buy-in might lead to some federal awareness down the line as well. But I think the thing that's most exciting about these events, in addition to that picture winding up in the New York Times or a version of it, is that this has actually turned into an ongoing series of events that we're still doing because there's been so much local interest and so much community buy-in in terms of where we built this and just the sheer size of the lab. We still are giving ongoing tours and showcasing the lab to community members. It's even been really valuable here at the university too, from an admissions standpoint, to bring people down there. So I think the takeaway from this event is we could have just done a press release and said, okay, we're building this new lab, but actually we turned it into a series of things that we could kind of mark key milestones and highlight various elements of the research and our researchers over the course of the next 18 months and still ongoing today because the lab is fully operational at this stage. The thing is and this will be a theme throughout my presentation, is that we can't do this alone. This was not just me and my team. We had a series of partners. So I'd encourage you, if you're thinking of events like this, especially a multi-year campaign of events, is to really engage a network of partners on campus. For us in this case, because there were so many important stakeholders and VIP guests, we worked very closely with our Office of Development, especially on actually almost all of our events, the groundbreaking, the ribbon cutting, all of those. They were heavily involved in planning and executing that. The second is our media relations team, and I mentioned a picture got in the New York Times, and that was driven by the city of South Bend, but we had some great local coverage as well, and you can see the interview happening there with a local television station with the director of the lab. That was really valuable. People were so curious as they saw these giant things moving in, and we were doing all this work on the power grid. They wanted to know what was happening, and media relations really helped us get the word out. And finally, I don't know about everyone's setups on campus, but we have an in-house agency, our Marcom team, and they really helped us think through the brand execution as we rolled out this whole new lab, from the website to the t-shirt that you're seeing that guy wear, just making sure we had thoughtful and strategic promotional items, giveaways, and print materials. Okay, so the next one I want to talk about is a little bit different. This is our Cancer Research Institute, which is known as the Harper Cancer Research Institute. They've been around since 2011, and they're, again, another different sort of research institute for us because they're actually a joint initiative with the Indiana University School of South Bend, School of Medicine here in South Bend. So that's a great partnership for us. They do research on all sorts of cancer, but ovarian, breast, and bone are some of our more prominent ones. I think what they do really well is that they have built events into their calendar. It is just something they host many, many, many events throughout the year. And it's just a key part of how they showcase their research as valuable to the community. And I think if you ever hear their director speak, she understands that cancer impacts most, if not all, families. And so really helping our local community and our elected representatives, such as our senators and our congresspeople, understand that has been very valuable. So I'm just going to show a few examples of what they do throughout the year. The first is an annual open house, and they've done this now for 4 years. It's exactly as it sounds. They open the doors to the building, which you can see in the top right, and they invite anyone from the community in to come and meet our graduate students, meet our faculty researchers, and tour the labs. And this is really, it's been really a popular event that's also really valuable because of physically where Harper sits is kind of at the edge of campus, kind of touching a neighborhood. So it's great for them to open the doors and let people in and really showcase the impact that the research is having on everyone and potentially everyone in the community. I think the thing that they do that's really fun and different as well is that they in turn invite, excuse me, community organizations to be part of it too. So you'll see in that bottom left photo, you can't see it in detail, but we had local breweries there, local restaurants who could be part of the event. So it really feels like a celebration of all things Notre Dame and all things South Bend. And it's a great annual event on our calendar now that I think people really look forward to. The other thing that Harper is really intentional about doing is engaging with our elected representatives, so our members of Congress and members of the Senate. And on the top, you'll see our Senator Joe Donnelly. On the bottom, you'll see Congresswoman Jackie Walorski. This is a regular piece of engagement that they do, whether it's inviting them in for tours, hosting meetings together. But I think what for me was most impactful is seeing how Congresswoman Jackie Walorski then in turn went to the media and said that she's going to go and continue to fight for funding for research on these diseases. So it just shows you that there is value in talking to your elected representatives and sharing with them the impact that the federal funding is having on research and what that means for the people in your lab and people in your community and all those sorts of things. So Harper does a really excellent job of maintaining and developing those relationships. But again, essential to that, they couldn't do that without the help of various partners on campus, especially in this case, our federal relations team. So not only are they in regular contact with them about who's coming to visit, but making sure we're maximizing those locally and in DC as well through the media and other opportunities. I think, as I mentioned, community organizations, just reminding everyone that Notre Dame is part of the community and the community is part of Notre Dame. So kind of breaking down that town gown barrier. And I think Harper does a great job of that. And finally, and you've probably noticed, we have wonderful photography here on campus, and we're very fortunate to have on staff photographers and videographers. So if that's something that you have or you can afford to hire someone, I think it's so valuable because it not only can reinforce and remind people of the great work that's happening in your research space, but also you can use them in the future as thank yous and mementos for maybe partners and things like that. So we're very appreciative, and we use our photography and our videography all the time to showcase our research. So the last event that I want to talk about in my time is our annual Alumni Reunion that happens here on campus. Notre Dame is a little different than other universities. We don't host reunion as part of football season with a homecoming. It's always in the summer. So that is actually a great time for our researchers to be able to take some, I don't want to say time off, but take some time to showcase their work to our alumni who come back. So for the past 3 years, we've hosted a STEM themed open house. And every year this has grown in popularity. And so this past year, we've had about 45 different booths and poster displays, many of which were showcasing the great work that they're doing as a result of funding from federal agencies, including the NSF and DOE and DOD. And I think the thing that's most exciting is that we're not just inviting guests back who did a STEM degree at Notre Dame. We're inviting all alumni back to learn about STEM research now at Notre Dame, because as I mentioned before, this is a change. It's a growth area for Notre Dame, and I think a lot of people, when they come back, are surprised and excited about what's happening. So it's been really fun for us to engage with alumni as they return to campus and see the changes, especially in the research area. So just to note, atop there, that's our nanofabric, or our Center for Nanoscience and Technology, ND Nano. At the bottom left, that's our linked experimental ecosystem facility, and this is where we have a series of artificial streams and watersheds. And actually now we have some bald eagles nesting there. So those pelts that you see are things that the bald eagles have brought back as gifts. And then another fun little way to engage our alums is that's the smoothie bike from ND Energy. And they're just showcasing how a bike can create enough power to blend your own smoothie. So we do a lot of fun, engaging things at these sorts of events, because if you're thinking about the rest of the activities the alums are doing, they're out there having a good time. So we really want to engage them in something different. I think the other thing that I really value about this event is, although it's showcasing research, we're also taking the opportunity to highlight other opportunities. So in this case, we actually had a dedicated booth with open jobs at the university, and we focused mainly on STEM positions, but this was one of our more popular booths. People were really interested in the hiring that was happening on campus, the areas that we were searching for people, and we were hopeful that even if it wasn't the people who picked up those job descriptions, maybe they have a friend or a child that would be interested. Related to that, we did the same for degree programs. So our graduate school, our admissions programs, they were there recruiting as well. And that was really valuable to showcase, okay, there's a lot of ways to become involved with research at Notre Dame as an undergrad, grad student, postdoc, and then as a faculty member, of course. And then finally, we have a brand new research building on campus, McCourtney Hall of Molecular Sciences and Engineering, which you're seeing the photo of there. It's 220,000 square feet of lab space, and this is a great way for us to get our alums to see this new building, to tour the labs, meet the researchers, and really kind of show it off to them, because it definitely wasn't here for most of them. And just up top, this is another fun way we engage the alums at this event. It's the Chem Demo Team. It's a group of grad students who make liquid nitrogen ice cream. They extract DNA from strawberries. It's kind of aimed at children, but everyone has a lot of fun with it. So finally, just to touch on our partners here, again, we couldn't do this without our partners, especially in this case, catering. You might recognize me down in the bottom right, enjoying a STEM-themed cocktail, but they really created a whole experience for us. This was not something we do for many events, but for this one, we really wanted to engage people and get them to have fun and to celebrate research on campus. And so that was one way we did it. And then I'm sure this is a familiar group for most of you, but we work very closely with our licensing team to make sure we're always ordering items that are brand standard and from approved vendors. So they're a great partner to us as well. So overall, my kind of key takeaways is that events are a key element of what we do here. It's not the main thing that we do, but it's a great supplement and a great way to engage people and showcase the impact federal funding can have on research. I think they take a lot of time, effort, and budget, and that's why partners are so important, especially early on. So we really value our partners, and we always look for new ways that we can, improve and expand on ideas. And then the other piece is just that follow through that I touched on. We really do try to thank our guests afterwards, whether it's just sharing photos on social media or for partners who are really engaged, sending that thank you note, sending that frame photo. So kind of that touch point afterwards to really steward the event. So I think that's all that I have. Oops.
That's great. Thank you, Joanne. And Kristin, over to you now.
Awesome. I will just share my screen. Hold on a second. I want to share this. Share. Sorry, guys. Can you see what I'm seeing? I don't know what you're seeing.
I can see it.
Oh, good. Are you seeing my notes, or are you just seeing my slides? Hopefully you're just seeing my slides.
I can see your notes.
Oh, no. Okay. That's unacceptable. Here we go. Okay, so we'll just play it as a slideshow, and hopefully I'll remember my notes. So first of all, thank you to the Science Coalition for inviting Florida State and the National Mag Lab to be a part of today. I'm Kristin Roberts, the Public Affairs Director. I do want to take a second to just acknowledge events on Florida State's main campus, sort of like Notre Dame. There's just so many things happening on this huge, beautiful campus. Here's a couple of glimpses of some of the things we decided to feature today. My favorite on this list is actually the first one. Discovery on Parade is a research commercialization event, and it actually tells that story about the business and inventors and investment opportunities that kind of come out of foundational fundamental research. So I think that's a really interesting story that's being told with that event, and it's actually a partnership between Florida State and TCC and Florida A&M University, so all of the higher education institutions here in Tallahassee. So you get kind of a good glimpse of just all sorts of things going on, congressional visits. There's events within departments all around the lab. Saturday morning physics, a physics and math circus is actually coming up in a couple of weeks. Pub policy talks. There's just amazing things happening all over campus at Florida State. But today, we're actually going to do kind of a deep dive into one of Florida State's flagship events, and certainly the Mag Lab's flagship event. So just to get us all on the same page, the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory is the only facility of its kind. It's the largest in the United States, and it's the largest and highest powered in the world. So we have these like insanely powerful magnets, and we share them with researchers from around the world, and hopefully from some of your home institutions to come here and conduct their own research on materials, energy, and life. We are headquartered here at Florida State University in the Southwest campus, but we're also sited at the University of Florida and at Los Alamos National Lab. And we are funded primarily by the National Science Foundation and the state of Florida. So as a federally funded facility, we feel like tax-paying public are key stakeholders into what we do. So when the lab first became part of the Florida State campus back in 1994, we held our first open house. And we talked about open houses already at Notre Dame. This open house, is similar, but a little different, hopefully. And we're going to kind of do a deep dive into what this event really is. So hundreds of people came, right? And it kind of looked the way you think, right? Those pictures of big science posters and a couple people staring at them, probably far too technical for most people to understand. But every February since, we've invited people back here to come explore the science that happens. And for the last 3 years, more than 8,000 people have come. So we're really proud of this massive number. And we want to kind of talk a little bit about how we got here, what the communication strategy is, and whether events even make good communications tools at all. So we believe events are exceptionally important communications tools. This actually comes from the Science Festival Alliance, and it's far too much to read, but you guys can kind of skim it to see that events really give us this opportunity to physically connect with our audience. They make our science and the things that happen here much more engaging, more relatable. There's research that shows that people leave feeling more interested, more connected, that they're actually more likely to continue engaging. And there's even some findings that show that there's a greater potential to reach underrepresented groups through events than with other traditional informal science settings. So we're excited about events woven into our communication strategy. So what are we trying to do at Open House? Well, first thing, we're trying to attract tons of people, right? Just like everybody else, we want more and more people to know about our facility and what we do. We want our event to grow over time, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we continue through the presentation. We want people to leave with an understanding of the lab, an appreciation for what we do, who the people who work here, the research that happens, and even just high magnetic field research in general. And then we really want to show that science is fun, that it's important, and then kind of a communications goal, we want to increase that post-event engagement, right? So if 8,000 people or more are coming through the door, we want that to translate into some growth in followers and fans who we can expect to follow us. So audience, this is a public event, right? Taxpayer stakeholders. So those people really span age, gender, ethnicity, income levels, geographic area. Our survey data is actually showing that this event's becoming a regional event. So visitors are traveling from all over Florida. And for those of you who don't know the geography of Florida, Tallahassee is probably about 8.5 hours away from Miami. So that's actually quite a trek that someone would make to be a part of this event. People are coming from Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, and Texas. And our survey data is also showing about 30% of our attendees reporting an annual family income of less than $50,000. So we're really proud that this is having an impact across income levels. Let's talk about budget, right? Because events can be very expensive. This event is not particularly expensive. We host it for about less than $5,000 a year. And most of the dollars, as you can see here, are spent on like logistics, right? Renting tables and chairs for demonstrations, renting giant tents for some of our outdoor demonstrations, some of the safety equipment that we need so people can really get up close and experience the science. And then we print like a large map and a program of the day's events. So on average, this is less than 60 cents or about 60 cents per attendee. So events don't have to be super expensive. You'll notice as communicators that none of that money goes to advertising or promotion. We don't have a promotion budget for open house. We use completely free public relations tools, earned media. We ask people how they've heard about open house, and that coverage is really the most important way, as well as friends and other direct emails and things like that. Social media is turning out to be an exceptionally important tool for us, reaching about 150,000 people, probably more. And then just a glimpse of some coverage from the last couple open houses. I think last year's open house alone, media coverage wise, reached about 300,000 people. So the earned media is really helping. So what's the secret to this event's sort of success? Well, the first secret is that it just has to be hands-on, right? So open house features about 100 different creative, dynamic, hands-on demonstrations, right? And it explores the interdisciplinary nature of high magnetic field research. These demonstrations come in all shapes and sizes. So we have a massive junkyard magnet that like squashes huge 2-liter, bottles of water and milk, and we have a shrunken quarter machine that shrinks quarters into the size of dimes, right? But we also have really small demonstrations all over our 400,000 square foot facility. These are designed with different audiences in mind. No one demonstration has to serve all 8,000 people. We do make liquid nitrogen ice cream too. That's always a favorite. We smash flowers with frozen, cryogenics. So there's some really cool, fun things, both for kids, but for visitors of all ages. And I just want to remind everybody, combining just a large number of small activities can create an event with a really big impact. Another secret to our success is just relatability, right? High magnetic field research is pretty complicated. Most people, when they think of magnets, they don't even really think of the kind of magnets that we have. So we're already behind the 8 ball when it comes to meeting them in the middle. So we go back to the basics. We go to food and vegetables and fruit and candy and swimming pools to try to help us connect with our audience. We've had candy makers here talking about how superconducting wire is made. We have a very powerful MRI machine, so we use vegetables to show how powerful that resolution is. And we've really gone all in on this relatability in the last 3 years with themes. So the last 3 years, we actually explored a theme of music, a theme of movies and sports. And the other thing that these themes have allowed us to do is actually to partner with some really special flagship programs that are part of the Florida State portfolio. So we invited the School of Music, it's a very well-respected school, to come and actually put on an opera performance underneath the world's strongest magnet. We looked at how speakers work. There's actually a lot of magnet technology in speakers. We had people play a banana piano to talk about circuits. There were just tons of demonstrations that explored this harmony between both science and music. Florida State has an exceptional film school. So 2 years ago, we had our open house on Oscar weekend, and we just went all in on the movies, right? So we talked about green screens and green screen technology. We made Harry Potter magnetic wands, and just had tons of demonstrations that talked about the technology involved in movie making and the science there. And then last year we partnered with the athletics program and Florida State's Institute for Science and Sports Medicine to talk about really how science is like a sport. So you see a picture there of some students who were explaining combining angular momentum with rollerblading. And that's a snapshot at the bottom there of some of us who staged a performance of a subatomic smackdown, where we actually did a little boxing battle between which subatomic particle is the most powerful or the coolest. So there's a video on our YouTube channel. You can see me make a fool of myself. So another secret to our success is consistency, right? So this event's been growing over 20 years. We held that first open house back in 1994. We picked a date that really is part of our event brand. When we moved it to the spring, it's every year, the last Saturday of February. People expect it. They ask us about it. You know, they really think about open house and spring in Tallahassee. Don't be afraid to kind of start small and grow your event every year with incremental investments. And you can see this graph just over the last 10 years. We've seen our audience almost double, actually, from over 4,000 to over 8,000. The other secrets to our success that I just won't dive too deeply into, but that I have to mention, just an exceptionally engaged staff, about 200 scientists, you know, staff members, technicians, volunteer, and lead these demonstrations. If it were just me and my team of 4, we would not have an event of this scale by ourselves. It takes all of those people creating this whole story of science. We also work with community partners. We invite about 20 different community partners to come be part of our day and kind of fill out the Tallahassee and the regional science story. And then food trucks kind of complete the experience. We want people to come out from 10 and stay all the way till 3. So we don't want them to leave. They walk outside our front door and get fed with some yummy food. And then we have these amazing partnerships with FSU. I mentioned those flagship departments and programs that are providing that relatable experience. But there's also other labs in this part of campus. It's the southwest part of campus that have started opening for open house, and it's providing this massive, huge day of science here at Florida State. So how do we know we met our goals? Well, we survey our respondents, and all of our respondents leave with a positive opinion, say they would come back. Almost all of them say they would come to another Mad Lab event. We look at growth in Facebook and Twitter likes. We're seeing about 6% growth in Facebook likes and Twitter followers, about 3% after the event. You can see it starts to tick up over that month, and then there's a noticeable increase even from the day of open house. And then we hear from attendees in their own voice, right? They tell us that, you know, they learned that science is really important, that Mad Lab is awesome, that magnets are important in society, and that our scientists, you know, were willing to talk to them and answer questions. They see diversity here in this building, and they really, you know, feel connected to us as part of the community. So just to wrap it all up, first open house, like 1994, around 300, 400 attendees. Last year's open house, this past year, over 8,300 attendees, less than $5,000. That makes it about 60 cents per person, 100 demonstrations over 5 hours. So that is the end. Let me stop sharing.
Great. Thanks so much, Kristin, and thank you, Joanne, for both of those presentations. At this time, we're going to open up the floor for some Q&A. And I'm actually going to invite Jean to kick us off. But please feel free to chat me and send in your questions.
All right, guys, this is Jean again. So Kristin and Joanne, this is the time that you can tell us exactly what you think. No script here or anything like it. So first question for both of you, and feel free to chime in first, whomever feels most comfortable fielding the question. But first things first, both of your teams put on several different events year in and year out. We got a taste of that today. Do these events fit into a larger strategy that your teams or universities have planned out beforehand? And if so, how do you measure the event's success with regard to this overarching strategy?
You want to go first, Kristin?
Sure. I mean, so, you know, as a nationally, as a taxpayer funded lab, as I mentioned, you know, events are a key part of our communication strategy. So we have a monthly public tour. We have this open house. We're in the community all the time and all over the place. And we really feel like this is what we owe people who are investing in this science.
Just, I'll add to that. We also have a communication strategy. Events are a part of it. But I think in terms of measuring success, the key thing that we look at is well, numbers one, but also our willingness to change and modify as a result. And so the Alumni Reunion that I showcased this year, we did it maybe 2 years ago, and numbers kind of dwindled, and it felt like it was not as vibrant as it should be. And so we took a step back. We brought in some new partners, and we kind of grew it out a bit. So I think whatever your metrics are, whether it's numbers of attendees or social media posts afterwards, I think that willingness to assess that data and be willing to change as a result is really important.
I completely agree. So those themes have been really new evolutions for Open House, right? Open House has been going on for forever. And shortly after I joined the lab, I found it really challenging to continue to promote an event that was very similar year in and year out. And so we felt like we needed to evolve, and that was sort of the creation of themes. So I completely agree with that. And I think I hinted at some metrics here in this talk, just attendees, and then we survey our attendees. So we use those survey metrics to help create a bigger picture of who's coming, because one rainy day and that attendance could be a harmful metric suddenly.
Those are great points. Thank you both. So I'll ask one more question, then we've actually got some questions from folks dialing in. And again, for anyone attending the call, if you have a question, feel free to type it into the Zoom group chat, and we'll get to your question after ours. So specifically, I want to talk about audiences. So we've learned today that different types of events appeal to different types of audiences, whether it's the community, local stakeholders, businesses, etc. Can you share what types of formats of events best engage two different audiences? The first being the federally elected officials, whether they're back in town to tour, or press, so local or national reporters that are coming to your events. Can you kind of speak to what you both have found works best to attract those audiences?
I think from our perspective, for the elected representatives, I think that they really value that one-on-one time, and everyone values that. But we, especially with the Harper Cancer Research Institute, building those relationships has really been key. When it comes to the local press, I alluded to the fact that we have a central media relations team here on campus, and they have incredible relationships with our local media and national media as well. And so from my perspective, I don't engage personally with the media, but we would work really closely with media relations to identify who we're trying to target, who we want to be there, the timelines, all those sorts of things, lining that up in advance. So again, for me, it comes back to kind of that advanced planning and making sure you're not dropping things on people the day before or things like that. So those sorts of things have worked well for us.
Yeah, and from our perspective, so I mean, I think Open House is definitely more of a community event, but I actually will share that a few years ago, we had an elected official who wanted to be a part of a pre-open house meeting. And so while our staff was still setting up, we actually had sort of a one-on-one individualized experience at open house. And that official actually stayed for kind of the opening of the building when it opened to the public. So, don't forget that sometimes these events can attract, more than even who you intended. So we've had other experiences with elected representatives that are more tour-based, and I think Florida State does a really good, I hope some of their central office staff are on the call, but I think they do a fantastic job with congressional outreach and those representatives. So they actually hosted a day not long ago where those visitors got to stop at a lot of really important federally funded research centers here on campus. And so I think that was something that worked really successfully for them. As you can see from my talk, the local media really love covering open house, but we enjoy enjoy a lot of good coverage locally for stories about our science and funding as well. And again, like Notre Dame, there is a team on Florida State's campus who's a little bit more expert in that piece.
That's great, thank you. And actually that segues well into one of the questions that we have from our audience, which it seems like you guys can speak to tangentially or at a high level, but this is mostly a question for your comms team. So feel free to punt if you must, but can you elaborate more, and sorry, this is from Kelsey Greenacre. Can you elaborate more about the media efforts and pitching you did to get the coverage? And so again, even if Joanne and Kristin, this was not the work you guys directly did, can you speak to what your media relations teams did, or at least what you know that they did?
I think I can speak to the Turbo Lab series of events most closely because we were really involved in that. And I think a lot of that was advanced planning for interviews. So we obviously had a press release that went out under embargo and all that standard stuff, but it's setting up those interviews and really showcasing why this lab was different. So we had the reporters down in the lab. That photo that I included, they were down there. They got to see the space as well. And it's a part of South Bend that for a long time was very underdeveloped and is still going through a lot of transition. So I think getting people to that physical space to see it was a really valuable part of our media relations efforts because they were excited to see the changes. And so I think kind of giving them that experiential moment was as important as getting them the kind of the practical information.
Yeah, so our story is somewhat similar, right? We have a big event where lots of people come. So the media, for the most part, want to come when everybody else is here. But we also hold some media preview days in the days leading up to the event to help increase coverage of it. So, we kind of have a dual goal. We want, that coverage on the early side so we can tell people about the event and get them here. But then we want coverage of the event too. And we've been pretty pleased with both of those things, but sometimes it is hard to balance those two goals, right? They don't necessarily want to write a story before and during or after. So sometimes we've had to kind of pick and choose who we go after and when. Something to think about.
Awesome, thank you. And we've got another question from Charlie Steed. With these organizations being federally funded, what restrictions do you face paying for advertising or bringing in outside organizations like food trucks or bars, things like that? Can you kind of speak to the challenges in that regard?
I guess it's the thing I would say is most, and I don't know officially, but I would not think we're using our federal funding to fund these events, if that makes sense. Like that money would still be going to the research and this would be separate budget items. And then Notre Dame, of course, as I'm sure Florida State is too, has very strict rules about, say, alcohol or licensing or all these different things. So that's to my point about partners, we work really closely with the people who know the rules better than we do. So our licensing and our caterers and that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm not sure I have a ton more to say on that, but I would think that these are separate budget items, but we're very mindful of how we spend the money. And then like Kristin said too, we also don't have an advertising budget. So we use a lot of social media. We use a lot of earned opportunities, but we're not spending money on those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think this is a really great question because, that is a challenge, right? That all of us face. There's not a lot of dollars to do these things. And so I will say from our experience, at least here in the Tallahassee community, the food trucks are really happy to come. They don't, we don't pay them anything to be here. We don't charge them anything to be here. It's sort of a symbiotic relationship. They have access to 8,000 people who are hungry and we don't want them to leave. So it's sort of a win-win. So some things that you might be hearing about that you think might have a cost affiliated with it, doesn't. That food isn't provided for free. There is a charge for that piece, but of course people can choose to take part in it or not. And so so those are important details. And then I think foundation accounts definitely help fill in, the gaps. We can't use any of our funding to buy to make liquid nitrogen ice cream, for example. So we do have to seek some, small amounts of foundation funding to help fill in those gaps to provide the experiences that people want.
And I think that's just a good point to Kristin's point that people are willing to volunteer and to give. And we found that our partners are very willing to chip in or to try to give their time or whatever it might be. So that's something to think about too. If you're putting on an event on a shoestring, there's lots of people who typically want to be involved. So it's worth asking at least.
All right, great. And we've got one more question from Megan DeMuzio in the audience. Can either or both of you talk about whether certain event strategies work better for local policymakers or state legislators, governors, et cetera, compared to federal policymakers? Do you find that those audiences are looking for different things? And yeah.
I guess I'll jump in. We have a very, very engaged mayor. I mentioned him, Mayor Pete Buttigieg. So he's a great partner for Notre Dame. And I think that has been a real strong effort of Notre Dame's is to kind of bridge that community gap. So we're just trying to do more in general with our local elected representatives. Just letting the community and letting those representatives know that we're part of the South Bend community. We want to be, and I think anything that you can do to open the doors and let people know like it's a great place to come and visit and to see what's going on and everyone's welcome. So those kind of warm and welcoming events like an open house or those sorts of things really have worked well for us.
Yeah, and from my perspective here at the National Mag Lab, within Florida State's campus, Florida State has wonderful people who are expert at engaging both these state officials and the federal officials, and so we work in partnership with those teams. But in my experience, we've actually had a lot of local representation at things like open house. It's just an easy day for them to come and be part of the community that they serve. We haven't had as much federal involvement, so not as many of our federal representatives want to come be part of that chaos, but some of them do, and so it has been really interesting. And I think that's a really interesting question about what events work best for which group. I find that things like lab tours are just a great idea for any of those, whether they're local or federal, or serving, the state. A detailed lab tour, can't be beat probably, right? So it's a different experience than open house, and it requires a little bit more messaging than kind of a choose your own adventure, which is more like what open house is.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much. Those are all the questions that we have from folks dialing in, unless within the next few minutes anyone dialed in wants to type in a question to the group chat. But other than that, I will hand it on over to Vanessa.
Thank you. So yeah, if there aren't any other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up today as we're nearing 3 o'clock. But thank you to everyone who dialed in. Special thank you to our presenters, Joanne and Kristin. Both presentations really show the power of events in translating fundamental research to the community, to policymakers, to press. So really insightful, thank you. We're going to be sending around a recording of the webinar in the coming days, but in the meantime, everyone have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.